Hello everyone and welcome to Make Believe. We're playing World and Economica. Last time we learned from Lisa what was going on with Hagana during the shopping trip, and we started the virtual stock market competition. Like, we have not a lot of days to think before actually starting it. So, Yoshiharu has to come up with a plan fast. Is he gonna be able to convince Hagana to help him out with the financial math formulas? We'll see if he's gonna end up taking that bet. The clock had just about hit noon when I remembered Lisa's order. Having lunch? I grumbled to myself in annoyance, but I realized I was running on empty at the same time and obediently headed into the living room, where I saw a wrapped up sandwich sitting on the table. I should use the bathroom first. I poured the rest of the coffee from the coffee maker into my cup, tossed it in the microwave, and headed to the bathroom. Okay, the microwave, because I was about to say, shouldn't you go to the bathroom before you pour the coffee? 3 meals a day for 10 moles was rather cheap. I took a leak and then washed my hands. I grumbled to myself as I headed back to the living room, and there I stopped completely in my tracks. I didn't expect something was waiting there, because why would it tell us about his little trip to the bathroom? Somehow, at the same time, Hagana also came to the living room. Crazy, right? The shocked face on her. Both of them are great with words. We were both rather surprised by each other's appearance and looked away, pretending the other wasn't there. However, Hagana sat down at the table first while I just groaned. As expected, I wanted to be excused from sitting alone with Hagana while we quietly ate our sandwiches. For now, I took a detour over to the microwave and picked up the warm coffee cup. Hagana was quietly eating her sandwich nearby and didn't bother to even look up. I heard from Lisa that Hagana's overly pushy haggling at the clothing shop yesterday was her way of thanking me. Yeah, we heard that last episode. So, she was trying to be helpful and thank him, but she was a bit too pushy, and her lack of social skills made that interaction at the end very awkward. If that were the case, then it was possible that I was being sensitive in what I said. But on top of not knowing about that, Hagana had kicked me squarely in the shin. There was that too. Rather than it being a favor to me, shouldn't Hagana apologize to me properly then? You're forgetting her lack of skills. That's what I thought, but judging from the silent Hagana's mood, I could sense her anger pretty clearly. Was I so wrong? I wanted to ask her. I guess Hagana might just be more of a princess type after all. You know, maybe both of you should apologize? Just an idea? I shrugged my shoulders as I sipped on my coffee, and I headed back to the table as I thought about taking the sandwich back to my room to eat. It was at that moment that I was aware of Lisa's computer, which sat in a random spot on top of the sink. A pinhole camera, the kind used for video calls, was powered on and pointed directly at the table. She's actually watching them to see if they eat at the table and how it develops, huh? But good eye to notice that. She would go that far, huh? In my mind, I was disgusted by this, but I honestly had to tip my hat for her for going to that length. Besides, if I took a deep breath and thought about it, that we were all living together under one roof, thinking about how long I'd had to stay here did depress me. In such a confined space, whether it was the toilet or the bath, chances are I'd run into her rather often. It was annoying to think there would be an awkward silence between us each time. I didn't think I had done anything wrong. Hagana was wrong, if anything. Nevertheless, I was determined that this was where I should show my sincerity as a man. Coffee cup in hand, I returned to the table. I figured sitting diagonally from Hagana's chair would be the furthest point from her. Of course, the sandwiches were placed carefully on a plate in the center of the table. I took one of them and started chewing on it. It appeared to be handmade by Lisa. At least the ingredients were certainly very grown up. There was tuna with leafy greens and peas, and there was a lean meat in between. A tuna and meat in the same sandwich? It seemed that she took into consideration my mentioning how strong the flavor was, and the mostly mustard flavoring was kept to a more reasonable amount. While Hagana's small mouth was halfway done eating her sandwich, I had already devoured my first. I licked my fingers and took a sip of coffee before reaching for a second. It was then that I spoke to Hagana. Okay, so you're the one speaking first. You're fine without anything to drink? I thought I had chosen something harmless to say, but Hagana did not look up at all. Want me to make you some coffee? I spoke out to her again, but I didn't get even the slightest reaction out of Hagana. Her disregard for me was almost refreshing in a way. Despite my attempts to meet her halfway and compromise, it didn't appear that she wanted to concede anything. Yeah, meet halfway and compromise I feel like is the best option. While I wonder why I couldn't get out of this gridlock, I decided that since I already tried to reach out to her, I might as well try again. Hey. I changed the tone of my voice slightly, which caused Hagana to react. Though she was ignoring me, it wasn't as if her ears were closed too. Hagana stopped eating, and I took that time to speak. I heard from Lisa in regards to what happened yesterday. Hagana did not respond, nor did she look up. It was your way of thanking me, right? Hagana did not reply, as expected. However, she did go back to eating her sandwich. On top of that, she was eating more quickly than before. Is she trying to finish and leave as soon as possible? How should I say this? I didn't know about that, and I spoke without thinking. I mean, it wasn't that I wasn't thankful for you bringing the price down. But well, it isn't that... I didn't wonder how I end up rambling like this, and I was fishing for words to break the deadlock. And at that moment, did she speak up? Shut up. Not words I expected. Hagana replied with a simple phrase. I was completely taken aback, and I stared at Hagana. Hagana stared at the table as if something bad about her was written on it. And then, after a short period of time, she started eating her sandwich again. And this time, she was going even faster than before. She's very mad, huh? It was clear that she was angry. No, wait a second. While I was left dumbfounded, it was as if I felt some sort of major premonition. I'd lose my cool in the next few moments, I thought to myself, as if it were some sort of weather forecast. If nothing else, Hagana's actions were uncalled for. I don't get it. I said, shut up. Wham! I just feel the hairs on my temples standing on the end. Huh? Why did you say that anyway? You were the one who kicked me without reason, and I'm already in a worse position, so what is with that? And now they're fighting. Hagana did not look up. Surprisingly, the hand that held up her sandwich stopped moving. I took a deep breath to hold back the impulse to toss a coffee cup in my hand. But the anger in me did not abate. I glared at Hagana and spoke. Back on that subject, it was you who was wrong for all that unreasonable haggling. Yep, now they're just sinking down that hole deeper. According to what Lisa said, it was the result of Hagana being a bit too enthusiastic about doing it. But if there was no ill will, and all could be forgiven, then there would be no hardship in the world. But Hagana didn't say anything else. After finishing her sandwich, she stood up from her chair. And then she looked at me with anger and disdain and spoke. You don't even work. Well, sort of. You don't know his life. He still gets money. On hearing those words for a brief moment, I forgot about my anger and just replied with a question. Huh? Did you steal money from your mommy before you ran away from home? Is that why you put on airs about having money? The malice in Hagana's words was way too clear. But those words were so unexpected that I couldn't stay angry. You don't work, and you're on the computer every day. And who are you pretending to be paying off that interest? I was dumbfounded as I looked back to Hagana. I was not working? We're doing all that we can to survive. We're different from someone like you who was born on the moon. That was the one thing I didn't want to hear from someone who came from Earth. Hagana fired off those words one after another. Lisa is way too nice. I don't know why she would protect a punk like you. And then, even though it looked like she still had something to say, it seemed like she was overcome with emotion that the words didn't come out. Hagana looked pained as she knitted her brow, and then suddenly turned away and left the table. Wait! I called out to her reflectively, but Hagana did not turn back. Just like that time at the clothing store, Hagana did not look back at all and left the living room. Before long, I could hear the door to her room close. Once again, I was left there, dumbfounded. Well, at least it wasn't like that time at the clothing store, when I had no idea what was going on. And this time, at least she talked. I remembered the look in Hagana's eyes when she said that I didn't work. That was a look that stuck out in my mind when I first came here. That was the source of Hagana's crabby attitude, it seemed. What was going on in her mind was that she came to the moon because she was bought, and that she also financially burdened the place she fled to after running away from home. On top of that, even with her mathematical ability, which she used to teach children, she was probably dismayed that she couldn't help solve their fundamental problem. And that same Hagana, who saw me on the computer every day in the church, probably saw me as a punk kid who just played around all day after running away from home. I probably looked like an example of a Luna-born, Luna-raised idiot whose mind has gone slack from the low gravity. Yeah, because they have no idea what he's doing, so from their point of view, he's just slacking off all day long. Knowing that now, how Hagana was acting didn't seem all that unreasonable. I wasn't really angry about anything at that point. That didn't quite settle the problem, though. For example, should I go to her room and knock on her door in order to tell her that it was all a misunderstanding? The fact that I was making a huge profit on the stock market and not actually playing around on the computer, I feel like that might be the best choice. Should I say that she shouldn't misunderstand me? Maybe that might be going a little too far. And after I said that, Hagana would open her door, show understanding, and apologize. Of course, I didn't imagine that would be the case. I just figured it was impossible given Hagana's stance. With everything, it was a matter of timing. You couldn't undo what was already done. I learned that many a time from trading stocks. I scratched my head and decided. I realized that it didn't really matter whether Hagana liked or hated me, but it really was a good feeling for her to have animosity towards me due to a misunderstanding. So are you gonna clear that misunderstanding? To say nothing of Hagana's supposed mathematical genius, which I couldn't use in this case. If that genius could be utilized, it would be a happy outcome for both myself and Hagana. However, until this misunderstanding was resolved, it would be difficult to get her assistance. I leaned back as my whole body felt exhausted from this, and then I turned towards the computer on top of the sink. I could imagine that she was spying on all of this from somewhere, but it's possible that she just left the power on and that nothing was being recorded. Think about Lisa's personality. It would be fitting for her to make such a mischievous treat. Even so, I looked at the camera and bit my lower lip. What should I do now? Naturally, there was no response from the computer. I sighed once more and looked up at the ceiling. Due to what happened with Hagana, and also not being able to find a good investment technique, I stared blankly at the trading on the investment contest virtual market. I wasn't really trading, but while looking at the movement of stocks, I was checking out what would happen if I bought a certain stock here or there. The result was a feeling that it could both go well and not go well. So, no answer. However, I kinda knew the cause of all this. It was definitely Hagana. He was too concerned about that. His mind was too focused on that problem. However, it wasn't about whether Hagana hated me or misunderstood me. What Hagana said started to stab at me, bit by bit. We're doing all we can survive. All we can survive. We are different from someone like you who was born on the moon. The people from the town I lived in came from troubled parts of the earth. For someone like me born on the moon, I'd yet to know how terrible the moon could be. However, the people who came from Earth knew enough about its ills, and also those of the moon. Having those words trusted at me like that, there was nothing I could say in response. Nothing in response to being called a spoiled brat with his head in the clouds. Well, it was true that I left home because of a dream even I thought ridiculous. Furthermore, trading had recently not gone too well, and I felt I was at a standstill, lost. However, that didn't mean that I wasn't trying my best at life. Realizing that I was making such excuses, I noticed that apparently I felt morally inferior to Earth folks, even more so than I had imagined. They were folks with dirt on their feet who worked hard to get to the moon. They abandoned their hometowns and came to a new frontier. Otherwise, they would have been dragged along by the unreasonable system in their places in the world. When it came to understanding the harshness of reality, I hadn't really had the same experience Hagana had. I wasn't an adult like Lisa either. Even though I had managed to earn 70,000 moles, it wasn't like any hard-working person couldn't save that up, and certainly wasn't enough to live on for the rest of one's life. Rather, if my trading had gone well, I would have been a classic moon-bred loser with no education, no money, and no idea of the hardships of Earth. I suddenly lost confidence in what I had been doing when Hagana told me those things straight to my face. Perhaps something was wrong with me, since I had pondered the simplistic plan of collaborating with the math whiz Hagana just because things haven't been going well. If good things happened just like that, then no one in the world would suffer. Since my trading had originally gone pretty well, perhaps I thought the world was a pretty easygoing place, and I was the only one who realized it. A pampered kid who knew nothing about the world. I then realized that, as unbearable as it was, I had to live with that moniker. I couldn't focus on trading the stocks in the investment contest, as it seemed that something was clouding my thoughts. I felt worry, hesitation, and anguish as I stretched out on the ground. And then, my mind hit upon one thing, and that was when I was summoned to Lisa's room, and the sensation I felt from her hug. Lisa was a kind and wise adult. What would happen if I sought advice from Lisa? Would she show me the right thing to say? I feel like you kinda already did when you were looking at the screen and asked what you should do. Maybe she doesn't see that message, and so it's an asking vain, but you kinda already resorted to that. I was honestly thinking about something this pitiful. I wouldn't call that pitiful. I wondered where that brutish motivation had gone. The motivation I had right after I left home. Perhaps I was just naive about how society works. Perhaps I didn't have grandiose dreams to go where no one had gone before. and to be the only one to rise where no one had before and leave my footprints there. I kind of realized that I was about ready to tear up. Even though I knew that thinking about it only made things worse, I could not stop. That is why, if I didn't hear strange sounds from afar just then, I might have drowned in the vortex of my own insecurity. Oh, what's the sound? Is it the doorbell? I opened up my eyes and looked towards the door, and after a brief moment, I could hear that sound again. The ding-dong sound was akin to wood being struck. Really? I wouldn't expect wood being struck would make that sound. It was then that I realized someone was at the door. However, despite the fact, I decided to continue to lie down and sleep on the floor. The sound came a third time, after a brief pause. Somehow or another, I had the sense it was sounding more impatient. Speaking of visitors, Chris came by last time. It seemed that she was delivering things for the family business during the lunch break from school without stopping to eat. If it was Chris at the door, it would be a shame for her to waste her time. See, he thinks about others, sometimes. Just needs to think about more often. At that moment, the intercom chimed, and I stood up and headed out of the room, figuring that Hagana was not going to come out. The intercom chimed 4 times, and then a 5th time. If it was Chris, it was possible that she really needed to use the bathroom. I don't think that would be the case. Thinking about that, I opened the door to the church after rubbing my eyes, just in case. And what did you find? At that instant, I felt it was plain good luck that I didn't instinctively send my fist flying out. Oh, Mr. Toyama. Is Lisa in? I completely forgot what voice I had for him. It was months ago. The sound of the intercom chiming a 5th time almost sounded resentful of the long wait as I came upon the gloomy face at the door. It was Toyama, the moneylender. However, the intensity of that gloominess was lost, most likely due to his obvious fatigue. What do you want? Lisa's in today, right? Toyama didn't respond to my question, so I asked this once more. I got annoyed instantly, but I did realize that it was probably just a mere outburst of anger. She ain't in. She isn't in? She said something about going to the university and took off. Ah, helping out with a lecture then. Toyama understood at once and nodded. It seemed that he knew more about Lisa than I did. And what's up with the soundtrack? I see. But if she's helping with classes at the university, then she should be returning soon. Would you mind if I waited for her? As he said that, he tried to slip past me and headed to the church, but I grabbed his shoulder reflectively. The difference in strength was clear. I thought that Toyama would recoil from this, but he just turned and looked at me and spoke in a seemingly sad tone. It's important. Before I knew it, I had let go of Toyama's shoulder. There was an unknown intensity, one a child might not have perceived, maybe, but it was definitely there. It was appreciated. On top of that, he bowed his head lightly. I said nothing else and just mumbled to myself. May I come in? After hearing the circumstances, I could only let him through. But, Hagana is in an unbelievably bad mood. I said that with complete seriousness, to which Toyama smiled, wearily. For a brief moment, his shoulders swayed as he smiled silently, and coughed as he cited. I will be careful. However, kid, you know how things are supposed to work in this world, right? Perhaps he wanted to ask me to protect him if Hagana started calling him names again. I felt it was only fair, but I'd be happy if I got acknowledged for that. It was just like Lisa said. I hid my embarrassment and turned away. You may come in. Pardon my intrusion. I let Toyama inside the church and closed the door. Toyama removed his hat and bowed his head a bit in front of the crucified, bearded man located across from the entrance. I think you're talking about Jesus. Was the matter so important that he had to pray to God? I thought about that as I led Toyama in. I brought the old guy some coffee and intended to seclude myself in my room. But I realized that was not the right thing to do, and so, as a compromise, I brought my computer out to the living room. Toyama sat on the sofa by the coffee table, while I sat at the dining table, which still had a couple sandwiches left on the plate, and I tapped away at the computer. Even though I couldn't really concentrate, I could take a look at what kind of stocks were in this virtual market. In any case, while glancing at the popular stocks, I started developing a hunch that these stocks were not fully fictitious and were actually based on real stocks, in line with rumors circulating on the net. Are you playing some sort of game? Toyama asked me as he poked his nose in on what I was doing. Something like that. I see. He sipped his coffee and appeared uninterested as he looked from afar. He spoke again while in that state. Is it interesting? Don't ask me such strange questions, I touched myself as I looked up. I guess. Let me see. What? Oh, nothing. I just thought it was nice that it was interesting. I shrugged my shoulders and returned to the screen. I guess the screen being faded is kind of like him not really looking at him. Your days must be difficult. At my words, he craned his neck towards me. However, instead of getting angry, he laughed hoarsely. He isn't so bad, but I guess it's because of this face. People often think that way because of it. He rubbed his chin as he answered. I did see something rather unexpected in response. I looked right back at him, wondering if he really could joke around like that. Well, maybe not, because apparently I'm looking back at him and the screen's still faded. You have a pretty good looking face, though. Will probably do you some good in the future. His words of praise were to the point. My chin was lowered as I looked at Toyama, who just left quietly, and now I'm really looking at him. You might have thought I was joking, but I know a thing or two about this. Well, it's not like I'd say you were a pretty boy. Well, what I said was my first impression. When I gave up trying to figure out whether he was praising me or not, Toyama gave a low laugh. To put it simply, it's a matter of who's capable and who's incapable. This was one of the things I learned through money lending. With that said, where do you stand? Me? Well, you can throw me in the lot of those who are not so capable. He rubbed his chin again as he spoke. Though he wasn't fat, his skin was saggy and his eyes showed fatigue. When he laughed, I could see some irregular teeth that made me think of a zombie out of a horror flick. Well, stubbornness is a selling point. Most of the time, it wouldn't go well, but no matter where, one can find a place to get by. Well, I guess they are like mice. I see. I ended up laughing dryly at how apt his self-description fit. On that point, Lisa's reliable even though she's young. That's something you're born with, and not something you can train yourself to do. She's reliable. That was a good description of Lisa. Well, what about Hagana? He piqued my interest, so I tried asking him that. Toyama grimaced upon hearing Hagana's name, thinking back to what happened before, but he nodded in response and answered. As for that girl, I'm not too sure. Well, it is true. I can see that she's clever, but that is about it. Hiding in the shell within oneself is like a young bird who hasn't hatched from its egg. What does that mean? You don't get it, do you? After coming to the moon to lend out money, occasionally you run into people like that. In those cases, well, there are many here from Earth who have talent that can be bought. My face froze for a bit, but Toyama just happened to reach out to his cup, Want to sip some more coffee? I told myself he couldn't have seen my expression. Money lending is less about the exchange of money and more about the exchange of trust. Understand? If I asked him if I understood, it would be annoying to say that I didn't. But I didn't really understand, so I shook my head, annoyed. Like, he's annoyed that he has to answer no. Promising. When dealing with someone like me, to be able to precisely answer that you don't understand when you don't is certainly an asset. I was not happy with him. Of all people praising me. That's what I wanted to say, but being complimented did feel nice, at least. Kinda hard to be angry at a compliment. Anyhow, I've been in this line of work ever since I graduated from college back in Earth. For 20 years, I've been determined whether or not to loan out money to people. What I learned was the financial standing of a lendee was one thing, but the real important matter was their character. Even if someone doesn't have any money, if he's a good person, he would without a doubt return it. On the other hand, if someone's of bad disposition, then no matter the amount of money, they will not pay it back at all. But there's another type of person that you shouldn't loan money to. That would be people like that girl. Toyama once again sipped on his coffee. For someone loaning money, so less fortunate in run-down area like this, there was some level of emphasis in his words. Toyama was strangely persuasive, as if he learned how to be from some unfortunate event in his own life. Maybe it did happen. How do you say it? She's tenuous, I guess. Tenuous? Exactly. She's not completely removed from reality, but I get the feeling that she isn't firmly planted in it either. Up to a certain point, she's just like the other people. She would grit her teeth like normal people, be happy like normal people, and get angry like normal people. But once that point is surpassed, there's only resignation. And because of that, she wouldn't even mind dying. Perhaps she doesn't feel like she has any value. I don't think she really thinks of herself as something precious. He's spot on. Toyama stopped talking, and a distant look came to his eyes. Perhaps his eyes were reflecting on a life that wasn't so straightforward. If one doesn't even believe in one's own importance, then there's no way one would value the money of others. Things that won't be paid back. And that is that. You do not think about what others think. You don't pay heed to how you are. No matter what happens, everything is viewed through a cynical lens. Lending money to people like that is not possible, no matter how talented they are. You've loaned out money to such people before? Yes, I have. While on Earth, I was a banker. In order to start a business, many people came to me. There were people like that, people more pathetic than myself, who'd hid a ruinous mindset in their heart. But there appeared to be excellent candidates. A large amount of money was loaned out. At first, all went well. But at some point or another, they stumbled, and I looked on wondering if they were fine with that. For myself, this is a business where I must have faith in the lendee to lend the money. For the person I can trust and loan money to, if a simple I flubbed that hard. If a simple failure makes them shrug their shoulders, throw everything away, and then proceed to simply be tired of life and hang themselves, well, I would be equally disappointed. I didn't like this kind of talk. Toyama, who was doing that kind of talking, didn't seem to be enjoying it either. That girl gives off this mentality. But she's still young, and it's fortunate that she crossed paths with someone like Lisa. Very lucky. If one's lucky is good, then one can break out of the egg. Doing so, they're able to chirp and warble. Warble? What is that? Should be able to raise one's voice like... Should be able to raise one's voice like that is one way to endure true life. In that regard, kid, you don't seem like one to be timid, and thus perhaps nothing troubles you either. Toyama seemed to be laughing mockingly at me, which was enough to anger me, but I no longer thought of him as a bad guy at the very least. An unfortunate person, perhaps, but he didn't seem to be bad. Besides, she still has something to protect, so that girl's indeed lucky. When I came here to collect the interest, she was really quite hostile. That girl, she ran away from home, right? On hearing that suddenly, I couldn't hide my facial expression. Toyama looked at me calmly and shrugged his shoulders a bit. Lisa was the first person who stood up for me, I suppose. It was as if God, or perhaps Buddha, manifested himself, I suppose. Hey, kid. What? Well, it's understandable for you to see full rage and to vilify me, but you must protect a girl like that. People like that aren't bad themselves. It's mostly just the environment they were brought up in. And talk about an environment she was brought up in. She came from an ashen-colored country, where there were boundless crags and needle-sharp coniferous tree forests. Oh, he knows. The winters were long, the summers short, and the sky would sometimes open up into blue so brilliant you'd believe it was God's work. I couldn't imagine Hagana leading a happy life. Besides, until we went to that clothing store, I felt Hagana was close to me. Even Hagana's strong arm haggling was the result of her determination, according to Lisa. Nonetheless, I did not know about that, and I had rejected Hagana's sincerity. Furthermore, I had ended up paying off the interest for Lisa, someone Hagana tried in vain to protect. Though she might have been grateful to go any further would put Hagana in an awkward position. Because basically you're succeeding on what Hagana was trying to do. Even though she was angry at me, there was probably nothing she could do. Besides, if she's a cute girl, is she not? Well, even her foul mouth and cuteness wouldn't be a match for my daughter. Both the foul mouth and the cuteness? I couldn't tell if that last set of words were a joke or not, but those words made it worth it for me to hear him out, and I forced out some laughter through my nose. Well, looked like I was talking a bit too long there. There isn't anyone who would take the time to listen to me. Toyama left in embarrassment and drank his coffee. I thought his smile looked unreasonably cool, and I was about to say that there certainly were people who want to listen to him. But the sound of a door further down the hallway opening and closing prevented these words from coming out. Hagana's coming in. I wonder how she's gonna treat the situation. Ah, looks like Lisa's back. Or Lisa. That is another possibility. I did not think about that because Toyama said that as he put down his coffee cup. Before long, Lisa was in the living room, and she blinked in surprise as she noticed Toyama. Huh? Did I need to make a payment today? No, I just wanted to speak with you today. Do you have some time right now? As he stood up, Toyama hunched over, and he looked shorter compared to Lisa. Indeed, it looked like only a small matter, but since he'd said it, I could feel that he really did go out of his way in how he acted. Perhaps this was another manifestation of someone with feet planted on solid ground, I thought to myself, and I started seeing Toyama as a grown-up in his own way. Oh no, I don't mind, but did Hal do something to offend you? Just as I was thinking about that, Lisa spoke up abruptly. Toyama turned to look at me just as Lisa was, and he laughed quietly before turning back to Lisa. We had an entertaining conversation. Oh my. Lisa was actually surprised, but I was a bit hurt by her reaction. What'd she expect from him? What exactly did she think I was anyway? Exactly. But, well, okay, I understand. So you wanted to talk about The loan, then? No, I'm here to talk about how to grow lilies. At Toyama's joke, Lisa laughed and nodded disappointingly. For the lender and the lendee, it seemed like they were tied together as if by fate. In that case, although it's a bit cramped, but please come to my room. If that is possible, then I would appreciate it. Toyama followed after Lisa. I watched them go when suddenly Lisa stopped and turned towards me. Now? What? Keep an eye on Hagana, okay? She had to put it that way, since there was no telling how Hagana would try to help if she found out that Toyama was in Lisa's room discussing loan terms. However, given the exchange from earlier, I didn't know whether or not I'd be able to make any guarantees on my surveillance duties. Or that's what I wanted to say, but I realized I couldn't really that, so I just nodded my head half-heartedly. I couldn't really that? It feels like a word's missing, like I couldn't really say that. It's possible that perhaps they did show some concern towards me. Before long, Lisa and Toyama ascended the stairs towards the second floor. With me left here, the living room became strangely quiet, so I returned to looking over stocks one by one. I feel like we can stop here. And there we go. Maybe next episode we'll find out what they were talking about. I wonder if there's something Haru can do. And there's also the whole conflict with Hagana. At least now he has a better understanding on why the conflict. I still think he should relay the information about what he has been doing to get money. Because that would help the situation a lot. I'm not sure if that would solve it completely, but that would certainly would have a positive outcome at the very least. But we'll have to see what happens with Hagana and what are Lisa and Mr. Toyama talking about the loans. With that being said,
set the scene in a local band's big dream.